We are live, so watch your tongue.
I can't tell. Doug Farnsley and me,
I see Chris, I see Lee,
possibly.
I see Sarah's name.
Yeah.
We've lost Don though.
That looks like it's
Very good. Yeah, that would be nice.
Can you hear me up there?
Yeah,
we
now
can hear you.
We hear you.
My apologies, you can begin.
We may begin.
Well,
See if we have everyone. We have everyone except
no,
Don.
Don's not on.
I'll text Don.
Here he comes.
There he is.
There he is. Okay, all six council are present and other people too. So let's begin. This is the regular monthly council meeting of the City Council of the City of Prospect, Kentucky. And today is October 18th, 2021. And all six council members are present. Let's see, the first order of business on the agenda typically is the presentation of the minutes of the last regular meeting, which was September 20th. And those have been distributed. Are there any suggested corrections or additions?
I
Hearing none.
understand that the one change has already been made to show Mr. Fulcher was through WebEx and not present.
That is correct.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
It's been done.
Anything else?
I move the approval of the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is the mayor's report. First of all, the only news on the LDG litigation front is that I have been informed by Grover that LDG's lawyer intends to take the depositions of me and of all of Prospect's council members who were on the council in 2017. And I'm told that this will happen in the near future and before December the 1st. Next subject, I have shared with the council an email I received from MSD saying that they have finished their engineering inspection and study of the Hunting Creek Drive culvert, that it's not in imminent danger of collapse, but that it needs to be replaced. And they estimate it will cost between $500,000 and $1 million. They will communicate again when they have firmer figures and a timeline. Next, we have a virtual meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock with KIPTA to talk about what they advise that we can spend ARPA money on. Sarah Odell has put together a list of various projects, some of which are underway, some contemplated for discussion. I've talked with the mayor of Douglas Hills, who also is consulting with KIPTA. And it's my understanding that they are using some of the money on parks projects, apparently with KIPTA's blessing. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, 10 to 11, something like that. If you want John Carter to send you an invitation to participate in this meeting tomorrow morning, please just let him know tonight so that he can send you that invitation. Next item, the street paving is finished except for a redo of a small section of Westover Drive, which is to happen this week, weather permitting. and also except for hall paving needing to resolve 2 residents' vehicle damage claims. As far as the City Hall parking lot, my meeting with Mark Madison to get that going has not happened yet. I'm waiting for Mark Madison to tell me. He knows we want to do it. Next, 2 things that some of us attended. Today, Chris Gorman and I attended a meeting of the Middletown Anchorage Fire Company, of which our Harrods Creek Fire Company is now a part. The purpose was for them to have us rank which of their services were most important, which were second, and so on. So that's all that happened at that meeting. On a different subject, last week, Don Gibson, Sandra Leonard, Beth Rogers, and I attended a seminar about public safety rather. 2 of the 4 panelists were the Metro Police Chief and Christopher 2X. And apparently the gun violence is being wrought by a relatively small number of people. And also apparently the gangs get their guns by having underage youth steal them from unlocked cars. I thought that was a very informative meeting and well done. Sandra and Don might also want to jump in and comment about that meeting if they so desire. As to the exchange of the land parcels that we've been contemplating, that will happen as soon as I receive the deeds, which are being prepared. And finally, I will get out a newsletter as soon as Ron gets back later this month. Now, I could report on 1 or 2 other things, but they will come up in other reports, so I'll hold my fire. Sandra, do you or Don want to say anything about that safety meeting we went?
No, I think you summarized it very well. I thought that, for me, one of the most interesting things was the balance of the 4 speakers, because they all had a different perspective. The police chief and Christopher 2X weren't coming out with a different solution, but they were coming from a different place. And the other 2 gentlemen I had never heard speak before, and I thought they were both very articulate. One, in my mind, came from a bureaucratic perspective, but not uninformed area. And the other one came from a data-driven area, which looked at, for example, the murder rate in Louisville being higher than the murder rates in places like Atlanta and Chicago. And for me, that was a revelation.
Yeah, I agree. The murder rate was per capita, but still, it was quite shocking. There seemed to be some agreement from all the speakers in terms of some of the next steps from the city. I didn't hear much about how to get the community and more at a basic level, the parents involved.
Let's
John,
move on into a committee report.
John, I have a couple of questions, if you don't
Sure,
mind.
Frank, right.
On LDG, I noticed on the financials that we spent $13,000 on that litigation so far this year. What is the bulk of that? What represents the bulk of that?
Frank, I can't hear you.
Can you hear this one better?
Yes, very well.
Okay. No, my question is on LDG. I noticed that we spent better than $13,000 this last 3 months on the LDG litigation. What has been transpiring? Are those just bills from prior months?
No, those are, when we get a bill, it's for the month just passed, so they're relatively current bills. They recently had to prepare briefs with regard to LDGs attempt to appeal from the court's ruling against them. Beyond that, it's at Grover's very high rates, dealing with the discovery requests, which is going on. It's not just depositions, it's other things as well. So LDG is really stirring the pot, and litigation is so expensive. That's what it is. I'll be glad to send you copies of the invoices. The best way I can show you what has been charged, what for. Would that be okay?
In the same vein, John, you mentioned the deposition that we're all going to be deposed at some point.
Well, the current council, only two of you. But
That's,
there would be the people who were on the council in 2017, which currently would be just you and Sandra, but it would also be, I've checked the records, and it would be Luke Schmidt and Stuart Miles and Susan Nicholson and Jeff Stovall, if they can find him.
would in that vein, if we're being deposed, Chris, would you be representing us?
Yes,
You would attend.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Another comment relative to the financials, and it's just a comment that I noticed that the monthly revenue exceeded by a small amount the 3-month total revenue. I don't quite understand that. And,
I'm not saying it's not true because I'll have to look, but that can't be correct.
well, I didn't think it would be. I'm just making a note. That's it. That's fine. I'm
Because
done.
that month would be part of the 3 months, and if the 3 months were, say, 200 and the month was 300, that wouldn't make sense.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and I'll take a look at it tomorrow.
It's not much money. It just looked funny.
Well, we once had a bookkeeper. She's not with us anymore. Who gave me a column of figures, which included a 6-figure number, like $100,000, and then a total, and the total was less than $100,000. So sometimes you see stuff like that, and you say, "My God, that's not right." So I'll take a look at it tomorrow, Frank.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Anything else before I go into the committee reports? I don't believe we have a Parks Committee report tonight. Is that right, Sarah, as far as you know?
That's correct. We actually have our meeting, I think next week. So we didn't have one before this council meeting.
Right, it doesn't show up on this agenda. We do, however, get a Forestation Board report from Lee Tucci.
I'll begin by reporting that the storm last Friday night caused tree-related damage. 2 residents contacted John Carter, and he can tell you more because I'm simply reporting what he emailed to me. At Star Point, limbs fell on a car. The resident said that the trees were part of Harrods Creek Park.
We looked at that today, and that does not appear to be the case.
Okay. Can you have any other comment there, John?
Well, just on the Star Point, that one I know, based on the look at logic mapping, it appears to be private property.
Okay.
The second one, I believe, was,
Gunpowder Lane, you mentioned?
and that's been cleaned up.
Okay, very good. I already distributed the regular October report. We did meet last Tuesday with the Forestation Board. We're working on 14 cases where there's hazardous trees or branches overhanging roadways. 5 of these trees at least involve city property. 3 are situations where we can determine whether it's a city property or residence property. We're waiting for Ron to come back and help us out on that point. And we're going to be contacting 3 property owners through code enforcement to take remedial action. And there's a couple cases we still have to do some work on forestation board part. And Andrea Hanlon has arranged for the State Highway Department to take responsibility for taking down a dead hackberry tree, which is located basically on the edge of Little Hunting Creek Park and Route 42. In the fall planning projects, which will happen probably around Thanksgiving, we're putting in 16 new trees. The prize hemlock has already been planted in the entrance area of Hunting Creek Drive, and if you're going up Hunting Creek Drive, it'll be on your left very early on the first median there that past the entrance. And some of these trees, 2 of them are donated, or 1 of them is a donated memorial tree, and 2 are through our canopy tree program. Total of 16 trees. The other thing I wanted to mention is we voted to have our Arbor Fest event Saturday, October 30. That'll be an open air event behind City Hall. We have arranged for 50 trees to be distributed to residents. About 15 of these are Kasuga dogwoods, and about 15 more are varieties of magnolias. And I have the whole list if somebody is actually interested in that. And our main concern is publicity about this event, but if there's going to be a newsletter coming out before the end of the month, that will be very helpful. John Carter had offered to do an e-blast, but the newsletter or both would be great. That's basically the end of my report. If anybody has any questions.
No, thank you, Lee. The next item is a US 42 safety study update. And I imagine that would be Herb Schulhafer. Herb, I can't see you, but can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. We haven't had a frost in Prospect yet, but my Wi-Fi sure wants to be frozen. But anyway, 11 weeks ago, we put out a request for proposal for a consultant to help us in the planning study for safety improvements and other aspects of US 42. And I'm happy to say today, well, we've met a bunch. The selection committee is made up of the mayor, Greg, Sarah, Al Bensfield, and myself. And we have done it the way the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet says it needs to be done. And we've come to the day where the mayor got the final question he had. He had a major concern, and him and the city attorney talked with our advisor with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and the mayor is going to be signing the agreement with the consulting firm, and the firm is QK4. And we will have a schedule of a lot of meetings, public meetings. In fact, all council members will be invited to these meetings, and we'll be sending out this schedule. But we have a meeting pretty happening next month with the consultants. They're off and running, or they'll be off and running. They're ready to go. So, is there any questions I could answer?
Herb, I'd just like to add a thing or two. In these various meetings that our group has had, we have been very fortunate to have the guidance of a man named Larry Cheney, from the transportation cabinet. And I learned today when I talked with him that he used to be, until 2019, fairly high up in KIPTA. So he knows a lot. And he guided us through this process. We had to first choose a company. We had initially 3 applicants who responded to our request for proposals. It got narrowed down to 2 right away, and then those 2 got narrowed down to 1. So that was the selection. And then we had to go through again with QK4 on what they proposed to do, the scope of the work, and that was pretty detailed. So we got through that, and then we had to go through a negotiation process of how many hours they devote to this, how many to that, and how much it would cost. And we got all done with that. And then QK4 put together a proposed contract based upon those meetings with the scope of work and the negotiation and prices. And that came in, and then I started questioning a couple things, mostly because I'm a lawyer. And then I gave Herb an ulcer because he thought that I wasn't going to do anything. And we had a couple of terse emails back and forth. Then I got together with our city attorney, and he and I hashed it out. And then today we got on the phone with Larry Cheney and went through everything that I was potentially concerned about, and I was satisfied, and Chris was satisfied. So we now have the contract, but the contract proposed by QK4 wasn't just something that I could sign. It was something that, again, had to be blessed or not by the transportation cabinet. And I received that blessing by email today. So we're good to go. QK4 has proposed just today a schedule of what they plan to do starting out, and they will be starting work this month. So that's my addition to what Herb had to say. This has been a very intense few weeks with lots of meetings and lots of detailed discussion.
I guess the one thing to add is the City of Prospect's obligation will be a little shy of $62,000, which initially could not exceed 67.5. So it's going to be a little less than 62,000.
And that's because we negotiated the contract down from the original maximum of, I believe it was 375, down to about 309 and change.
Yeah.
So that's where it wound up.
John,
Correct.
can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Would you mind elaborating a little bit on one other thing that I think happened at your meeting today? As far as, I know no one has a crystal ball, but as far as what you think this might mean in terms of us obtaining funding next year, I think that came up too. Would you mind elaborating on that a little bit, please?
During our conversation with Mr. Cheney, and Chris and I talked with him early this afternoon, I raised that. And I said that I had heard that the results of this study, which has been blessed both by the Transportation Cabinet and of course by KIPTA, made it much more likely that when the study is completed and we have the recommendations for improving on this and that and lighting and guardrails and interchanges and that sort of thing, all the recommendations that we might get, that it seemed to me it could make it more likely that KIPTA then would be willing to give us yet another grant to accomplish what QK4 recommends. And Mr. Cheney agreed with that rather emphatically. And I think that has some connection or relevance to the fact that until 2 years ago, he was at KIPTA. So a lot of these people know how this stuff works. We're kind of the new kid on the block as far as dealing with KIPTA and getting grants, but we're learning.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, if not, we'll move into the library updates. Andrew, do you have anything for us?
The only thing going on right now is the book sale is continuing. As of right now, we've made as much money as we've ever made on a book sale. And of course, you know that I was frightened that because of COVID, nobody would come in. I was dead wrong, and I'm so glad. We'll keep the books up at least until the end of October, because I was in here for hours on Friday. And even then, we sold about $50 worth of books. And when your most expensive book is $3, that's a lot of books. That is the end of the library update.
Congratulations.
Missed part of it because of a technical difficulty. Could you say the last piece of it again? Sandra.
The last thing of importance that I said was that the books would be up until the end of October.
They do not want us to hear that because now it has twice blocked you out. Okay. We'll move along. Thank you very much, Sandra, and thank you for doing that. That's great. The next thing on the reports agenda is wage and benefits survey of comparable local cities report. Who has that report?
Actually, Greg Hulsman and I are going to share it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I picked up a new microphone. Basically, as you know, we've been working on this for quite a while. And part of the reason I'd like to just, I know you can't all see me, but we've had over the years a number of personnel manuals. There was one in 1990, small, maybe 20 pages. There was one in 1997, maybe 20 pages. There was one in 2001, maybe 22 pages. There was one in 2014, and we maybe are at 40 pages. And then the one presented to us is a tome of way over a couple hundred pages. In fact, maybe more than that. And so the question is, what's in the proposed manual? And that's been the subject of Greg Hulsman and my research. And there are thousands of data points that we've come up with. Our research is still going on, but as you know, we're looking in now to refine it and to make it more accurate. We've also surveyed, as we presented to you last week, the comparable cities in this area to see what they're doing in regard to employee manuals, wages, and benefits. In a mayor-council form of municipal government, the city council, as the legislative body, is responsible by Kentucky statute for establishing the basic duties of non-elected officers and employees and setting the compensation for those jobs. Because the council is responsible for enacting the city's annual budget, the council is also responsible for employee policies that impact the budgets. And it may do that by a municipal order or by ordinance. We told you last month that we had looked at other cities, and tonight what we're doing is we're looking at how Prospect's policies have changed over the years and how they compare to comparable employees. One of the things we discovered was that the last time Prospect City Council enacted a municipal order or ordinance relating to employee benefits was 1997. We'll present a report at the November meeting with the specific areas where Prospect's policies are significantly different from other municipalities. And now Mr. Hulsman, who I've thoroughly enjoyed working with, is going to explain the data in the two very complicated spreadsheets that we've given to you.
Well, thank you, Sandra, and ditto back to you. It's been wonderful. And this is some of our work that we've been doing since actually January of this year. But I don't know if John can pull it up, John Carter. But if he can't, you should have in front of you a copy of the spreadsheet that Sandra and I sent Friday. It's a 2-page document. And John, are you able to share that with everyone? Or
Which document do you want to share first?
it is the spreadsheet that is called report number 2.
Okay.
If you can, I think everyone has it. And I can walk everyone through it even if you can't do that. So that's okay. So basically, it's a 2-page document. Basically, the first page has a green background to it. The second page has a buff background. But both pages take the averages and the ranges of the data that Sandra and I got from the surveys, which we talked about at the last meeting. Yes, thank you so much. Perfect. Thanks, John. So, so a lot of this on the first page, we're going to call that non-actionable items because we've either already taken care of it through the budget. There are salaries on here that we already resolved back when we did the budget in July. And the other things on there, for example, the population, well, of course, we can't control that. And the annual income, those kinds of things that are in the white background, we'll worry about that later. John, if you can roll up to page 2 on that. So page 2 is the section that's in buff background. Thank you, John, that's perfect. So it is in this section that we must concentrate our efforts. Of course, we want our personnel policy to be a good personnel policy. We also want it to be the right personnel policy that has good business reasons for it being implemented the way that it is. So what has frankly happened is over the years, things have come up. And the biggest thing to me that I'd like to call your attention to is the vacation schedule. So in 2018, by executive order, that was pretty dramatically changed, and such that the amount of vacation there is rather high. And when you compare it to other cities, which you can see in the yellow, John, if you could scroll up a little bit, but if you can see that typically our local comparable cities are in the neighborhood of anywhere from 80 hours of vacation for the first 1 to 5 years, up to a maximum of 160 hours. Well, we go way higher than that. So I'm not suggesting that we take anything away, but I am suggesting that we really need to take a look at this. We're not here tonight to make any decisions. We're here tonight just to simply present the data and talk about how we got to where we are today. And as Sandra mentioned, these things have come up, and through one reason or another, they've been implemented by typically recently by executive order, and not so much the council approving the dollars on that. So, but back to the vacation, if you add in the sick leave, the personal leave, the bereavement leave, the parental leave, the adoption leave, the mental health leave, and so on and so forth, it adds up. And that's a cost that we have to endure as a city. So that's something we're going to tackle at the November meeting. And as Sandra mentioned, there is some new information that has come to light recently. So we want to look at that, and I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's that the vacation is calculated in per pay period, not so much per month. So that's something we want to delve into for sure to make sure we know exactly what that is. So there's so much here, but happy to go through it and happy to entertain any questions that anyone may have about any of the data. If we can just concentrate on the section that's in the buff background tonight. So any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. I looked at your work product, and it was kind of a challenge to try to figure out which city I was looking at because it doesn't say. And I'm wondering if there's a reason for not telling us in a given column, this is the city of Middletown, or this is the city of Douglas Hills, or this is the city of Hurstbourne, or what have you.
Yes, yes, John, that's an excellent question. Back when Sandra and I were interacting with, it was 12 cities at the time, and 11 of the 12 were happy to participate and send us their information. So, but part of the deal was that we would keep their information confidential. And so we have with them as well. And so that's why we gave the cities a number instead of a name. Sandra?
But that also is the report that was on the last agenda, not the current one.
Right. Yeah, that was last month, John. So last month we were just saying, here's what other cities are doing. Not to say that that's what we should be doing necessarily, because everybody is unique, everybody is different, but nevertheless, they are local and comparable cities, and they are in essence competitors of ours from the viewpoint of employees seeking jobs and seeking benefits and wages and that sort of thing. So we think that it was right to take that step, but that was last month. So what we've done in this report is we pulled all that together and put that in one column, as difficult as that may be, but we came up with an average for all of those 11 cities. And we also, because averages can be kind of mathematically, juxtaposed sometimes, we gave a range in those sections too. So especially in the area of salaries.
Right,
Is that
right.
what you mean, John?
Yeah, right. And
So-
Greg, it was kind of fun to figure out who was who.
Yes, sir.
'Cause you sort of can.
Sorry, we promised
No,
confidentiality on that.
I understand that, and you did the right thing. I'm just saying
You could probably figure some of them out though.
it was fun to try to figure out who we were talking about.
Any other questions or comments from anyone as you go down through the buff section?
Are you going to do the other spreadsheet too?
I'm sorry.
The gray spreadsheet?
This is Chris. I've got a comment. I don't want my silence to indicate that I agree that the names of the cities can be kept confidential. I'm just it's over in my mind as to how you can take information that is publicly available because it's with tax dollars and then all of a sudden make it confidential. But I'm not going to make a big deal out of it tonight, but I didn't want to acquiesce by silence, and maybe it's
Actually,
okay.
we agree with you and we use that argument. But we also, this wasn't just, the end product was not just for us. The report that you're talking about, what we ended up doing was every mayor of every city that participated, everybody who sent us the data from those cities also got copies of the report. And so ultimately, we probably sent it out to somewhere close to 35 people other than Prospect. And that, I appreciate your argument, but when we send it out to that big a group, there are people who felt more comfortable if the cities were by number instead of by name.
Yeah, I think Chris is right. I think that's public information, but it's not a big deal to me.
I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. So, but I just don't think you can do it. Go ahead.
A lot of the cities with whom we spoke are just like us. They are members of KLC as well. And so they have that resource. But when we told them what we were trying to do or would do, they were ecstatic about that. They wanted that information because it's, to our knowledge, it's not been done. So it's a tool that they could use that's over and above the information that they get from KLC. So we found them to be really enthusiastic about it, and I guess that's evidenced by their willingness to participate with us and share their information with us. But I understand your point. It's a good point.
They sent it to your all's personal emails too, right? Isn't that how they sent all the data to you from the URL's questionnaire?
In general, yes, but not completely.
Just, I don't know if Chris has a comment. That may be something to think about for Freedom of Information request acts and stuff. Just, you guys may want to use your prospect emails. I don't know if there was a preference for using your personal emails. Just
Yeah, because Sarah, there's a
Public
recent
information. It's
Attorney
public
General
information.
opinion
Tax
by
dollars.
Daniel Cameron, which really is exactly in line with one that was issued back in 2015, both of which say that exchange of information on your personal devices is not subject to open records.
okay. I think Chris had said something. I didn't hear the last part of that. I do have a question for Sandra and Greg. It might just be that you guys had updated information. It's more of like a tracking thing. It's comparing the sheet that has the cities listed 1 through 11. So like I'll call it your all's raw data, and then the sheet starting page. It's printed as page 3 of 4, so I think probably the copy that John Carter has up. It starts with, do you pay overtime above statutory requirements? Basically starts at the beginning of the sheet. There were a couple, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 spots in those. I can go over each one where for some reason the answers that were listed in that average column didn't match up with the data from, I guess, like the raw sheet that was listed. Like I said, it may, like I'll just pick one.
The answer to that, you're right, and we should look at it. We may have expressed it incorrectly. In general, the answer to that was no, but one city has a unique way of giving part-time employees overtime because the part-time employees are working 30 hours a week. That was the work week for that city in the past, and they were grandfathered in. And so one city out of all of them does give overtime above and beyond what they need to. And so trying to handle that one city made it very difficult to put the thing into a spreadsheet.
Oh yeah, no, that's one. I saw 2 cities in there that had a weird thing. These are super minor. I just wanted to know if maybe I didn't have the most updated sheet, like, or any restrictions to accumulation of comp time. It said no, but there is one city that does. They're like, look, I don't think they're going to affect the whole thing. There were a couple in the is dependent coverage provided, prescription drug provided. It didn't differentiate who didn't respond at all. So some things look more like yeses, some things look more like no.
You're absolutely right. One of the very real issues with medical benefits is that people don't know what they're getting. And some of them would say, well, yes, I have drug coverage. And another one who was more knowledgeable would say, well, yes, we have an HSA or an HRA. And we didn't edit anybody's responses. And we didn't go back and tell them they didn't know what they were getting.
Okay. Well, perfect. Then that's why I asked, because it was just, I wanted to make sure I'm looking at the right stuff. And then I think some of the other things were kind of like that, like the mobile phone stuff. There was a definitive yes. It was 9 out of 11. Only 5 out of 11 restrict the phones where it was written as restricted on the sheet. So like I said, you all may have updated stuff. These are piddly. I don't know that it changes the course of what Prospect would do, but I just wanted to see where I was. My other questions are mainly actually about some of the other stuff, but I know that's not the time right now. So no worries there.
Yeah, I really like your last statement. I think that it's good information to have, but I think our eye ought to be on what should Prospect be doing, and then we can look back on what the other cities are doing as a guide to help us maybe. But our real question is, what should we be doing? What's right for Prospect in our city? And so while the information from the other cities is valuable, I agree. I'm glad we did it and glad we have it. It's just sort of background information because it doesn't mean we have to decide what's right for us. So I think that's the main emphasis that we want to leave with you tonight. And we'll come back at the November meeting and we'll delve into each one of these and start making decisions. I don't know if we can do it all in one meeting or not, but hopefully we will. There's really no hurry on this. There is one thing that would make it kind of in a hurry, but I don't think that is likely to happen. So we've got some time, but I think we can get this done this year. So, but
I'm glad you guys were able to send it to the other cities. I think that's a lot of work that will go to good use for people.
Actually, the responses were pretty interesting. In things like, what do you have for staffing? There are no two cities in terms of staffing that have the same pattern. It was I know we're all different. I know we're all unique. I don't think until we got the responses back and I talked to all these people, I had a clue how far those words go.
I do think this would be super helpful later on, those higher pages for budget discussions and whatnot. Did you guys, you can cut me off, it's a off the line question about the things that are contracted for cities. Did you guys get any feedback on what they pay to be able to think about that in terms of, because that was kind of lumped out of the totals? And if that's off topic and you want to cover that later on, don't worry about it.
No, in general, it depends on what you're talking about as to whether that information might be available. If you're talking about trash pickup, waste management, that information would come from a different source, possibly because it's apples and oranges. Nobody's got twice a week pickup at the back door like we do. And so even the contracting is as unique as we found the staffing.
anybody else, any other questions or comments?
I have a comment. I'm really actually blown away by the amount of work that's gone into putting this together, and I thank both of you for doing this. We, based on what Sandra presented, with 7 or so different personnel manuals over the years, some of which were not approved by council, we appear to be, with this information, appear to be moving from an arbitrary approach to a little more disciplined approach and something more rational than it's a good idea, let's give Joe a raise. So thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. I neglected, thank you very much, Frank. I neglected to cover something and I apologize. So, and I don't think you all have this, or John has this, but I sent it out on Friday to all of the council members and of course to you, John, our mayor, and Chris, and I think the chief too. So, so what has happened over the years, this goes back to, our research goes back to 1982. So it's way too much data here, but just let me hit the top row. So 1982, that policy was done by municipal order. 1985, that was an ordinance, number 136. In 1990, that was the same ordinance, but it was amended. In 1997, it was municipal order, and that was the last one that was done by municipal order. And then in 2001, executive order. In 2005 and 2010, the policy was updated with no change in the wages or benefits. But those were updates too. And then 14 was done by executive order and 2018 by executive order. So that brings us to where we are today, which really is what was sent to us last December to look at. So that's what we're trying to figure out today.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. That's it, unless you've got any questions.
I think we're out of questions for today.
I have one more comment. I think the pertinent point with the executive order is that it appears to bypass the council whose responsibility it is for the budget. So we're trying to get this thing back on track where the council takes responsibility for what it's statutorily required to do.
Well, I recognize that, Frank, and I got this product from Kentucky League of Cities a few months ago, and the only parts that I covered by executive order were the parts that did not involve money or cost to the city. And those were laid to the side for the council to deal with.
Okay, I wasn't referring to that, John. There were, in previous administrations, this type of thing occurred, so.
Well, I was the mayor in 2014, and if I did something by executive order that I should not have done, then that's my mistake and I'm responsible for it. I don't know whether it came up at budget time and was acted upon by budget or not. I'd have to go back and look at it.
Well, I think it's irrelevant at this point. We're trying to move forward as Greg said, you know, we're not trying to change anything at this point. We're trying to look forward and come up with something reasonable.
Understood and agreed.
Let's move forward on the agenda.
Thank you.
Anything else on this subject? If not, we'll move into the police report and ask Jeff Sherrard to give it to us, or Tony.
Okay, can you hear me?
I hear somebody.
Test.
Sounds like Jeff.
All right, I'm here.
Chief, I could hear you.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just going to fall over all the furniture here. I'm glad that Greg mentioned 1982 because I was a rookie policeman for Jefferson County in 1982. Okay, for the report, house checks were about 200 more than the same period last year. All the other reports and everything are in line with what we normally do month to month. Nothing stands out. Dispatch runs, officer initiated runs, nothing really stands out. The officer initiated were down a little bit compared to the same time last year. It's kind of hard to compare anything to the COVID year. The arrest, there was one DUI. We had somebody that was passed out behind the wheel. Car still in gear, foot on the brake, basically completely out of it. That was up on the entrance to the subdivision up in Hunting Creek, coming down the main road. It was a resident of Hunting Creek, just didn't quite make it home. The other arrest, that was actually all the same person, but those are a number of different charges because they had a number of fugitive warrants from another state. Actually, none of those warrants were particularly serious. They were all relatively minor charges. With regards to the reports, the call response reports, there was one report related to someone making threats regarding someone using an escort, and they made threats from a website. They deny all responsibility, but the person on the other end said that they were going to come back and kill him and his whole family, but the guy hasn't lived here for years. So I think that whole thing was a scam. Somebody just got a hold of some old information and attempted to extract money from somebody. We did have a car that was broken into over in the Sutherland. Well, actually wasn't broken into. It was an unlocked car. They just took some loose change. Nothing significant there. Let's see, the ID theft that's reported, it actually had occurred 5 months before. It was the victim's brother who was the suspect. It's a guy that has a frequent history of defrauding people. So he defrauded his own brother. So the moral of the story is don't piss off family. So, this was a significant theft and very unfortunate. It was a scam involving someone calling from Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. They actually did use the name of employees of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office who were currently employed, and said that this person had warrants out on them because they failed to show as a witness in a trial, and that they ended up getting them for several $1,000s in this scam, unfortunately. That scam has actually been around for a while, but a lot of times the names used were fictitious. That this one was particularly convincing. They used a lot of concrete details and was pretty good. We had a theft of an auto. This one was a little unusual. This was over at the Circle K. Three people pull in to use the to get gas to go inside. Two of the three people go in. The third person they don't know so well, she takes off with their car. And they had very little information about who it was. So she's in the wind and the car is gone. So, the one listed on here is a misdemeanor. That was incorrectly listed. It says a fugitive from another state. That's not correct at all. Jill put that in the wrong spot. This was a criminal mischief where somebody attempted to break into a car up at the country club and actually forced entry, but they broke the lock. And when they did, it activated the alarm. It scared off the suspects, and they took off in a car, and they didn't get anything at all. In terms of all that, that's all that we had from all the reports. Code enforcement. Rick actually had 39 permits were issued in September. That's a real high number for them. A couple of years ago when Les was doing that, there was about 110 for the year. 110 for the year. He did 39 in the 1 month, that he's been doing at least 30 in any month anyway. So those numbers are much, much higher.
We know what they're mostly for.
Those permits, mostly dumpsters. In getting some fences, development, we're getting some new homes. Of course, there's not a tremendous number of those yet, but
There will be. They just got their utilities last week.
yeah. And he's got a few more. And there's an unusual thing going on where people are buying double lots now to add some additions to it. They got one last week where somebody that's already had a house that's almost done, they're wanting to build a 4-car garage on another lot, but you have to connect it to the house. And they're in the process of already submitting those plans.
Interesting.
I mean, that's a massive size.
It must be.
This, I mean, it looks as big as the house.
I can imagine.
It's crazy. Let's see. So you get a lot of dumpster permits. Let's see. Occasionally we get some of the pods, the portable storage units. We get some of those. Let's see. Last Thursday was the last night for Officer Jim Wood. He retired. He'd only worked here for 3 years. He'd previously worked for Metro. He had some other issues that he had to take care of. So we're elevating Officer Tony Leish from part-time status to full-time beginning November 1st. She's been here 7 years. So she wants to work full-time, so we're going to do that. I missed last month because I was on vacation for a week and also went to end service. And I went to the Police Executive Command course in Bowling Green. And of course, with COVID last year, we didn't go, but I am glad I made it this year because we had 2 years worth of legal updates. There's a lot of stuff that we had to catch up on. There were a lot of legislative changes in the last 2 years, significant to police departments. In particular, there are now some training requirements that are mandated by the legislature, which they've usually stayed out of that for us. But they now are mandating quite a bit. Of course, with a lot of the unrest and things that occurred last year, we did expect and we did get changes in the way that search warrants are executed. A duty to intervene statute was passed. Of course, you have to put that into all your policies and things like that. So since I've got back, in the last week and a half, I've been updating policies for the police departments, and
Wow.
I've already got 4 of them in line, and I'm working on 6 or 7 more.
Wow.
Upgrading the use of force. Everything was already in there before, but we're having to change language into a lot of things, and which is okay. There's some model policies that exist that are pretty good, and we'll be able to slide right into those and then adapt them to departments of our size, because there's some things that they put in there, they're for much larger departments, but you can scale them down, which is an acceptable practice, and that's what we can do. So other than that, that's all I have for our report, and I think they're going to call me back on something else.
Any questions for Jeff? Moves us into unfinished business.
Oh, and I do need to point out, Mayor, that we do have 3 citizens
Right. Greg
that are
Hulsman
present
is-
to speak.
Greg
Okay,
Hulsman has texted me their names, and I appreciate that. We'll get to that in just about 1 minute.
okay.
But I want to see if there's any unfinished business that anybody knows about. Hearing none, we'll move into new business. And that's right before comments from citizens. So I'm going to interject some new business that relates to what I anticipate are the comments from citizens. This involves an alleged nuisance being maintained by a resident who lives on Rockingham Road. And you'll find in your packet 4 or 5 photographs of Mrs. McGrail's front yard. And also some correspondence that she wrote to a neighbor who apparently was not happy with Mrs. McGrail's front yard. And if you look at the photographs, you can understand what the situation is. Now, a couple of things about it. This situation has existed, as far as I'm aware, for a pretty long time. I'd say more than a year, maybe 2 or 3 years. But it's just now boiled up. And second, I'm aware that Rick Wilson and Jeff Sherrard, our chief, have conferred about this as far as what to do, if anything. And in your packet, there is a copy of the pertinent ordinance, and it gets down in the middle of that paper where it talks about weeds or grass. And there's an exception for things that are planted for some useful or ornamental purpose. Okay, so the question was, should code enforcement do something or not? And then on the opposite page is a Kentucky statute that tells you how you go about the things you consider in determining whether a nuisance exists. So you've got all that material in front of you. And I have a view of what I think would be the proper course. And I've discussed this with Chief Sherrard, but before I go there, I think it's time that I call on the residents who have come to speak, I believe, about this issue. And I have their names here, if I can just pull them up. The first one is, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, William Laise, Laise. Is he here?
I'm Bill Lace, 7604 Rockingham Road, Prospect, Kentucky. I've lived in Prospect for 25 years. I've lived in the area for nearly 60, back when US 42 was a 2-lane road. I want to thank the mayor and the council for having us tonight and listening to our concerns. This has been a long-term problem, as the chief knows. It's been a number of years. The one thing that's happened recently is that our resident at 7513 has significantly expanded this, what she considers a natural habitat in her front yard. And, it's something that upsets me every time I drive past her house, which is at least twice a day. And I usually don't get involved in these things, there's some things in life that we can't change and some we can. But when she wrote that letter to my neighbor Susan, who I've known since high school at Ballard, and she doesn't have a mean bone in her body, I felt it necessary for me to come down and to say something and to support her. She actually gave me a letter to read, which basically, talks about the response that she got on a response to something she put on the Backdoor app or the Nextdoor app. So as you all can see the response, it's very sarcastic. It's ugly. Her backyard's worse. It's like a jungle. My comment is if you want to live in a natural environment, then, pick some place to live in a natural environment. But we live in a organized neighborhood with codes and ordinances. And, I'm really kind of surprised, although, Prospect believes in liberty. They never pulled me over on my dirt bike when I was a kid riding out here. And it's always been, a relatively lenient place to live. But in this instance, I'm really curious why citations haven't been given to Miss McGrail. It's so obvious. I do have a question. I didn't know if it was really the residents' responsibility to point these things out when they're so obvious, or is code enforcement tasked with doing this on their own? Not that there's a right or a wrong answer. I was just curious, what that answer might be. There's many neighbors, some who are not here today. Susan could not be here because of a scheduled trip to California to be with her daughter. But I'd like to see something done about it. I've always thought about a couple gallons of Roundup to take care of it. But
It'd take more than a couple gallons.
We're chartering in probably unfair territory that we probably don't need to get into. That's probably not great statements to make there.
So I'd like to get some kind of response about what can be done. If and when I decide to sell my house, I have always thought in the back of my mind that I would seek legal counsel on this, because I believe it's a detriment to the value of our homes. So that's all I have.
I like your question, and I would like to know the same answer. Why has it never been cited? Because when I read our ordinance, I don't see anything that provides a waiver or an exception for a natural habitat. So I'd like to know the answer to that question also.
The only answer I can give is that in talking it over with Rick Wilson, who is a good code enforcement man, he hadn't been here that long, but he does do a good job, I think. The ordinance accepts vegetation planted for some useful or ornamental purpose. And I suppose that's what got Rick hesitant to move on this. This was called to my attention. I've seen it. I drive down Rockingham Road frequently.
Well, then you know that ornamental is not a choice word.
Well, it's arguable. In her view, it is ornamental.
But ordinances are not written to specific people's views. They're written to the entire population.
Let me cut to the chase, Sandra. What I have put off saying after talking with Jeff Sherrard about this, what I would recommend we do is cite her for a nuisance and let it go to the code enforcement board and let them decide whether it's a nuisance or not.
It would only go to the code enforcement board if there's an appeal from the citation.
Well, don't you think there would be?
I think that's a possibility, but I don't think it's something that at this point in time we can predict.
Bill, are you finished?
I would say it's a certainty.
Thank you.
Other residents we can hear from before.
We have two
you
more
make that.
residents who want to speak, and I'd like to ask them or give them the opportunity to do so. The next one is Ann Laves.
I think the chief wants to say something. John, you probably can't speak.
Mayor, it's Jeff. I'm going to address a couple of things before they get up and finish. Let me give you just a little bit more of the background. I came to work here in March 2012. And the very first couple of days that I came to work here, they drove me around and they were telling me some of the duties that we had. And code enforcement was something totally new for me. And Larry Johnson, who at one time was an interim chief, longtime officer here, he was explaining to me how they did things. And we actually drove by that property, and it's pretty similar now to what it was in 2012. And he's telling me about how they have these ordinances on grass. And he says, you're going to get a lot of calls and stuff on that. And I said, what about this property? And then it had this sign or whatever. He says, that property there is unique because it has some designation as a natural lands or whatever because of the way that they've grown that stuff up. And so, you know, I'm reading at that time that this property is somehow exempt. And
Except we need to know who made the designation.
Well, let me get to that. Let me get to that because they've got this sign in the yard that says it's a certified wildlife habitat. Okay. And then let's fast forward to the last couple of weeks. And ironically, and this may sound unusual, but over the years, I never really, well, it was my responsibility. I can't advise what went on when Mike Lesh was here. I had nothing to do with code enforcement for the few years Mike Lesh took it over. But when it was our responsibility, ironically, I did not get calls on that property then, so we never had to address it. So if we fast forward to these last few weeks, again, I was gone for a few weeks, and then when I got back, Rick asked to talk to me about this property and what's going on. So we did have some conversations, and he said, what are we going to do? I said, well, let's look into it and just tell them that we're checking in on it. And I think it came in on the complaint came in through the city's website. Correct. Okay. So, and then I think Mr. Carter was dealing with it too. And he said he was handing it over to code enforcement. So Rick and I did get a chance to do it. Rick took me by in his car to show us the current thing. And he actually took pictures of the this sign in the front yard. It's got a couple of other ones, but
Actually, the signs also are a violation.
okay, well,
They violate our sign ordinance.
okay, well, there's some signs that are acceptable and some that aren't, depending on what it says. Like a no trespassing sign is legal.
But temporary signs, these are all temporary and all of them don't meet that requirement.
All right, well, anyway, so earlier today, I looked up this certified wildlife habitat because I was curious, who designates that? Well, apparently that sign is, you just go to the National Wildlife Federation and you spend $20 and you fill out an application. And then that, they can give you that. So it's my understanding, now was preliminary, and this is not gospel, but this was just from a cursory check. That's how you can obtain that sign. And it talks about giving you that sign. Now, the 2021 version of that sign is a little more decorative than the one that's in her yard. But essentially, you get that when you fill out the application for creating a wildlife garden to attract birds, butterflies, and neighborhood wildlife. That's how you get that designation.
But that designation would not supersede the prospect ordinance.
No. But again, that was one of those things that this is one of those properties that I was led to believe had been addressed before I got here. And up until recently had not received that. So, and we had talked briefly, the mayor and I did on Friday and again earlier today. And we had come to the conclusion that we believe that this is a decision for the code enforcement board to deal with. And that when Rick gets back, we'll make the notification as it states in there that we believe her property is in violation. It's our intention to cite her under that. She will be given a period of time, which the ordinance requires to get that property corrected. If it's not, she receives the citation. It goes before the code enforcement board. And then she has to be able to argue those two little glitches, or I'm not going to say glitches, the two little possible exceptions in there if she wants to somehow claim that this is ornamental or if this is a useful purpose. But that's for her to decide now, not
Well,
me,
and
because I'm no longer buying this.
I like that whole lot, Chief, and
But yeah, again, and I apologize to these people here that it didn't really come back to my doorstep until recent.
well,
And for that, I'm sorry, but
I'd like to make a comment. Thank you, Chief. I think we're headed in the right direction. I hope this isn't long-winded, but a year ago, this council spent a lot of time putting together a code enforcement ordinance and a code enforcement board, which is still in effect. Those people are assigned the responsibility of adjudicating issues such as this. This should not be adjudicated by the mayor, the chief of police, or Rick. I mean, if there is an apparent violation, then I think the appropriate action is what Rick does very well is advise the person that he feels there's a violation and gives them time, a grace period to correct it before fining. However, if that doesn't occur, then citation is issued just like any law enforcement situation. And then the appeal process is available to the resident who has been cited. And in that case, it goes before five, right, Sandra, five? We have five on the code enforcement board to hear both sides of the situation, and their obligation is to judge the resident that has been cited, judge their position relative to the ordinance. And that's where we are. So I think the chief is 100% correct. A citation is in order for not only the grass, but the signs. And then if Jacqueline McGrail wants to appeal it. That's certainly her right. And then we move forward with the code enforcement procedure. Thank you, Chief.
I think we still have two people that can speak. Come up here, please.
Yeah, they can't hear you at home unless you go up there.
I'm Ann Lace, and my best friend lives right next door to her. Nice pool in the backyard. Her compost pile that's there and the jungle that's there has bring possums, skunks into their yard. And they're appalled by it. They couldn't make it tonight because they were out of town. But it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for people coming on the golf course and seeing that. But mostly the critters. Bigfoot, I think, goes through the front or something because she's got a big sign out there that says Bigfoot's there. But those critters are coming over into their neighbor's house. And I just think that's very unacceptable. The backyard is worse than the front yard. So that's all I want to say, because nobody really sees the backyard unless you're on the golf course or at your friend's pool. So
Generally speaking, a well-done compost pile will not attract critters. So
Well,
is there
yeah.
something that,
I bet she's lived there forever, and since all this, she's got they're over there, and he's putting traps out to get them out. They're not in anybody else's yards. I mean, it's what she has in her backyard. I don't know if you'd like to walk the golf course and see it. It's yeah.
Do you
above
have,
ground.
do you have the swimming
well,
pool
most
next
composts are
door?
above ground.
Do I? No.
Your house?
No.
Which side are you on?
Oh, I'm down the street on the
Oh, okay.
drop 7604. Yeah. So it's kind of what I want to say. 'Cause, a lot of people don't see the backyard.
Well, it's very possible that if this does go in front of the code enforcement board, both sides get presented. So
Yes.
it's very possible that people would want to have you present your information.
Right.
I'll leave you about the skunks. I live in Sutherland, and there was a residence that wasn't anywhere near this. And there were 17 skunks removed
Oh, my.
a year and a half ago.
Boy, am I glad I didn't live there.
Yeah.
Is,
But possums and all that, I mean, they're attracted by all that.
So you can consider this a warm-up for your presentation to the Code Enforcement Board.
Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna do that or not. That's good enough for me.
Is Leslie Rissel there and wants to speak?
Yes, she's coming up.
Yes, I'm Leslie Rishel and I'm at 7607 Rockingham. But I just kind of more to what Ann said, the vermin that are attracted by being that situation there is also attracting the coyotes. And that is not something that, I live and let live and all that, but, we have animals and I don't want my dogs to be near a coyote. So we're close enough that that's a problem. And, we have a boat and we get our permit when we have to have our boat in our yard for working on it and stuff like that. And we're following the rules, and she should have to follow the rules. She's got lawn, all these ornamental things in her front yard that aren't plants, lawn chairs and wooden metal things that have like glass bottles on them and stuff. It just looks like trash. It doesn't look attractive. And like Bill said, if you want to be in an environment where you are attracting bees and birds and wildlife, then you don't live on a golf course in Hunting Creek. You move somewhere where you can do that and be free to do that. We all want to live in a nice neighborhood, which is why we moved into Hunting Creek. So it's not like we're living in the slums. This is a nice area, and we want it to continue to be a nice area and continue to have our property values increase, not decrease, by the choice of one. So, and I think she needs to be cited. That's it.
We admire you all for coming forward, and we thank you very much.
We do.
Appreciate it.
Well, I think we know what we're going to do. Jeff Gerard and I will work with Rick Wilson, and proceed along those lines. And I have no doubt this will wind up in front of the Code Enforcement Board. I guess that's
Motion
the
to
end of,
adjourn.
hello?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Oh, that was fast. All in favor?
I.
All opposed? You are adjourned, or we are.
John,
Yes, sir.
I would like to be on the 10 o'clock call tomorrow. So I think I've already got an invitation.
It's those requests should go to John Carter. Maybe you were talking to John Carter.
I was talking to John Carter and he gave me a thumbs up.
I got you.
Oh, cool.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.